Catherine, to me, you're like the Da Vinci of the holistic world with multiple interests and talents. Because, when I was going through your bios and all you do, I realized that number one, you never settle for status quo, but you also have multiple talents and you just go from A to Z. And I love that about you. That's what connects us. So, hello.
Hello.
I am just really curious about your childhood. And if you can take us back to your childhood, what were some of the earliest experiences or influences that sparked your interest in biology and the natural world?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I've not actually been asked that before. I was very lucky or unlucky. Let's choose the lucky perspective. So my mother is absolutely animal mad and actually never wanted any children, but thought if she had children, she'd settle for one boy. And she ended up having 3 girls, which is quite funny. So when I grew up, I've never not had an animal in my house. And so my mother had a shed full of guinea pigs, a gorgeous German Shepherd dog, a Labrador, and she was always with the animals. So my earliest memories are of being with the animals. We had a lovely German Shepherd dog called Rocky, and he was just so adorable. He was huge. We loved him in the family, but all our friends were really scared of him. And so when I grew up as a child, I was really, really taken with the animals from the word go, because they were a consistent presence in my life. But also, it sounds very weird to a lot of people, but probably not you, Peter. I always could talk to them. I always could understand the world through their view. And we added to the collection. We had rescue tortoises, we had guinea pigs, we had a rabbit, we had rescue battery hens. My mother just added more and more to, and my father just was very tolerant and put up with it. And each one that came in, you could see them blossoming under the care. So I always remember when I was very young, my mother rescued some battery hens. And watching these animals go from literally traumatized, not being able to move, to gradually learning to trust us, to then getting to the stage where you could call them like a dog and they could sit on your lap. It was such an amazing experience that right from my early childhood, all I wanted to do was learn to ride. I was obsessed with horses, and it was quite funny because I was really small, Peter. So I've got a twin sister, and I was the smallest in my class, and my twin sister was the tallest. And when I was about 5, I'd been nagging my parents so much. My father said, right, you and I can learn to ride together. And my father was 6'4", and I was a tiny 5-year-old, as my mother always said, the runt of the litter. So when we went to this riding stable, so I was put on this naughty little Shetland. My dad was on this huge Shire horse, and I could literally go underneath his horse from there. So that was fantastic, learning to ride. So I think for me, I've always found it easier to get on with animals than humans, right from childhood. And I'm getting better at getting on with humans. But I think being lucky enough to be exposed to so many animals so long, really, I never thought of them as any different to any other member of the family, if that makes sense. And certainly in our family, my mother and father always treated the animals as just as much part of the family as the humans in the family.
That's beautiful. It sounds like the animal love is in your DNA. Definitely.
Definitely.
Were there any pivotal moments or people who steered you towards your passion for holistic health and animal care? I know that there is the love for animals. That's one part. But, then there's your passion for holistic health. And that came a little later, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting one because I didn't have anyone I knew who was following that route. Having said that, my mother would always use homeopathy. I always grew up with homeopathy in the house, more used for the animals than the humans, actually. But when I grew up and I sort of thought, right, I'm going to go and do biology because I really, really loved every aspect of biology. I thought about being a vet, but I knew I wouldn't make a good vet. I knew that there were aspects of the veterinary job that I would find too difficult to do. So I chose biology. And when I went to university, I loved all aspects of biology apart from the animal testing. But I think I became very aware of probably how much the science oversimplifies things. So, for example, if you take animal behavior, what you learn in the science of animal behavior often didn't tie up with what you'd see in practice. So I was the one at university that was always asking the difficult questions, but I was very lucky because my lecturers were very open to that. So it wasn't an issue. I know a lot of people criticize mainstream education, but I didn't have an issue with it at all. But when I came out of university, I had a horse. When I was 14, 15, I'd nagged my parents so much, they got me my own horse. It came from a friend of my mother's, and she was called Sheena. And Peter, she was totally unsuitable. I mean, she was so naughty. She just bolted off of me the whole time. There were skid marks down the road where she'd come back at 90 miles an hour with me hanging on like a farewell pony. My poor long-suffering father used to have to come out with me sometimes and hang on to this mad horse. But I didn't care. I'd waited my whole life for a horse, so I didn't really mind about it. I just learned to be very good at hanging on.
Latching on.
Yeah, literally latching on. I mean, it makes me laugh now because I wouldn't be able to do it now. I'd be too scared to get on her. But, I'd waited my whole life for a horse, so there was no way I wasn't going to make the best of every single minute of having her. And I did, and she lived to a right old age. But when I got my horse, it was the first animal that I'd actually, at the age of, I think it was 14, had complete responsibility for myself. My parents had grown up in London and loved horses, but never had the opportunity to have one. So it was a massive learning curve for all of us. And I studied and I studied and studied. But I very soon became aware that a lot of the advice I was being given, Peter, wasn't having good results. So the type of food I was being told to feed her, the way I was being told to medicate her and treat her, I was starting to then notice, because I had responsibility and I was noticing everything about her, that it wasn't having good results. So I just started doing a lot of my own research. And back in those days, we didn't have computers to do it on. So it would be going to the library, getting herbal books, etc., and just really observing when I was out riding her over the heathland, what she was desperately trying to eat. And then I'd go back and study and think, well, why? Why is she trying to eat this? She's obviously trying to tell me something, because it was very selective. It wasn't that she was grabbing at everything. Fast forward quite a long while, finished my university degree in biology. And at that stage, there were very few careers open. I could have gone on. My passion was animal behavior. But I then, by this stage, had my very old horse to look after, and all the contracts I was looking at were in the middle of nowhere all over the other side of the world, and I didn't have anyone to look after my horse, so I wasn't going to leave her because by this stage she was pretty elderly. The other jobs were in the pharmaceutical line, and there was no way I was going down that way, so I went into sort of different business jobs, but my passion for animals, I then started accumulating my own animals. I got cats first and then dogs and hamsters. And again, what I was finding by this stage, and I'm sure from knowing your story, you've noticed it, I was finding the veterinary medicine side of things was changing. When my mother had animals and she'd have a litter of puppy, the vet would come out, even if it was the middle of the night, to the house. And, you could call on your vet in emergency and they'd be there. But that was no longer the case in the UK. And I was seeing a lot of people with horses in particular, where the horses were having horrendous problems. And it was so obvious they were in pain. And the vets, and I'm not digging at vets, they didn't know any better, but they'd come out and they'd be saying it's a behavioural problem. And you could see this horse was in pain. It was giving every indication of pain. So I then, when I had my own children, I decided, right, I want to study some holistic remedies, some holistic therapies working with horses, but I wanted, and all animals, but I really wanted Peter to do something that really pinpointed the root cause of the problem. Because again, I was seeing that by this stage we had chiropractors, we had the good old Batman, we had nutritionalists, etc. But what I didn't want is I didn't want a job working with animals where I'd go out every 6 weeks and do the same thing to the animal and not make progress. Long story short, I came across Iridology, and that changed everything for me. Because when I went for an iridology consult myself, I didn't know hardly anything about it. And this practitioner told me things about my previous health, my personality, that there's no way. I told them nothing. I mean, there's no way they could have known, but I was still quite skeptical. And then they told me something, and I was like, no, you're wrong. I haven't got that at all. And about 6 months later, I discovered I did have what they told me. So they could pick that up the eyes long before any physical symptoms. At that stage, Peter, I was completely hooked. I researched, and I managed to find someone that taught equine iridology because I really wanted to work with animals. Did that course, did human iridology study as well, because with some of the modalities, the animal courses at that stage weren't really up to par with what you were learning with the human research. And I've just kept studying ever since.
Can you ever look into people's and animals' lives the same way as you used to? Because I know that you've been working with iridology and that you're really interested in that. When you have that degree of knowledge, does it kind of draw you to look in people's eyes and just kind of go? And how do you handle that kind of urge to let them know, and at the same time you feel like it's their life, like I should not be giving them unsolicited advice? How do you deal with that conflict, which I often have?
In the past, Peter, I've dealt with it really badly. I'm one of these people, because I'm interested in everything and want to know everything and am curious about everything. I've made the mistake of thinking other people are like that too. And so in the past, I have given unsolicited advice, and you very quickly learn the hard way that that's not a good idea. It is quite hard because you see it the whole time when you go out and see things, and you can see things so obviously. So what I've got much better at, and there's still a lot to learn, is questioning. So striking up a conversation with someone and just sort of asking some open-ended questions and seeing if they're open to information. And for example, when I tell people I'm an iridologist, they'll normally say, oh, tell me, what can you see in my eyes? Now, first and foremost, just by looking visually, you can only see really to a small level of detail. A proper iridology consult, you're looking through a microscope if it's a human, or with an animal, a magnifying glass and a zoom lens camera. So you can't do a full iridology consult just by looking in someone's eyes, but you can see a lot. You can see a lot.
Yes, you can see spots, you can see areas that are really severely affected. Yeah.
You really can. So then it's a case of really then ask, if they then approach me and say, what can you do? I would normally say, well, it's probably not, if it's at a party or a social gathering, I wouldn't go there. I now sort of say, well, if you're interested, let's arrange to catch up in private. The great thing is about things like iridology, they really show so much. And it's really important to convey that information in a positive way, where you can be telling people this is going to help you make better decisions or great decisions moving forward to stop these things becoming a problem, or if they are already an issue for you, what are going to be the great routes for you to combat that? Because obviously people are pretty shocked what you can see. It's absolutely incredible.
I've been working with iridologists in the early days of my holistic practice quite a bit, and
Oh, wow.
she was extremely talented and so on. I never learned the techniques and the approaches. When you're practicing, it's just there's just so much to do. So you have to pick and choose what you can study and what you just have to leave for someone else. But I've always found it very interesting, very fascinating. You have an opportunity to, at least that's how I see it, you have an opportunity to look in the future or prevent things from happening in the future, prevent the issues that may have not physically manifested, but they're already obvious in the eye, correct?
Yes, it's absolutely incredible for that. That's where the real skill comes in, because you can see the issues developing in the eye well before they manifest into physical symptoms. So when the person, whether you're doing the iridology with themselves, and I don't work with humans, I just do the iridology for animals, but if they're open, then they can course correct before the symptoms really strongly manifest. But even if they don't, when something does come up, like the situation was with me, it's going to click back to them really quickly, and they're going to understand, okay, now I need to go and get some help quickly for this issue. So it's so constructive. But then I started realizing, well, the iridology will tell you what the issues are and what your strengths and weaknesses are and how you can really harness them. But it doesn't actually, I know we can't use the word treat, but it doesn't actually, you could do an iridology consult with an animal. You're relaying that information to the animal's guardian, And if that guardian doesn't take action, the animal's no better off after your visit. So that caused me a lot of heartache, really, because I was going away and I was seeing some guardians were taking corrective action, but others weren't. And that left me in a real dilemma. So then I went on to study the communication, the Zoopharmacognosy, the light therapy, all the other modalities I do as well. And also, over this job, I've connected with so many brilliant therapists in all sorts of energy medicine, every possible modality you can imagine, so that there's always someone constructive you can point the person to based on their location, their belief systems, what the issue is with them or their animals, because that's really important, because there isn't a panacea cure for everything, as we know. But all of these things will give little bits of the jigsaw puzzle. But for me, it was really important that as a therapist, if I was actually visiting an animal or working with them, that the animal physically benefited from that session as well, and that I went away leaving the animal in a physically better state, emotionally better state than when I'd gone in.
Yes. Yeah. So people gather information. It's like, it's basically a scan, or it's a diagnostic method that can be very helpful. Zoopharmacognosis. I always struggle with that word as an ESL person. I know that you've been teaching courses on this method. Can you tell us what the word actually, what the term, what the name actually suggests, and explain it? And what courses are you teaching in that area?
The Zoopharmacognosy, and it took me ages to learn to spell it. It's a study of the natural compounds that animals take to rebalance physical and emotional issues. So there's so much study that's been done into what animals in the wild select for antiparasitics, pain relief, tumours, you name it. So a lot of our pharmaceutical medicines have been derived from looking at what animals select in nature and then making pharmaceutical copies of them. So the beauty is, it's like herbalism, it's like aromatherapy, because most Zoopharmacognosy practitioners work with a whole selection of natural remedies. So it can be clays, it can be herbs, it can be essential oils, it can be macerated oils, you name it, anything that's sort of a non-pharmaceutical product. But the difference is, so we learn about all the medicinal properties of it, we learn about the contraindications, the safety side, but we let the animal choose, because all animals have got an innate ability to understand what they need to rebalance themselves. And in nature, they will do that, which is what I noticed from a very early age with my horse. But when we try and prescribe things to them, you know, if you've got two horses that have got laminitis, the root cause of that laminitis could be very different for those horses. Not only have they got different inherited strengths and weaknesses, they'd be on different foods, different pastures, different exercise regimes. One of them that might have a root cause in the liver, one might be in the kidneys or the lymphatic system. So what that horse needs to put its body back into balance could be very different from another horse with laminitis. And as humans, we tend to think, right, that condition, this is what we're going to prescribe for it. But when you let the animals choose which liver herbs they want, which kidney herbs, whether it's got an emotional root, and also choose how they take the remedies and the amount, the results are amazing. But it is very dependent on being able to read the animal's reactions correctly. And also the animals can only select from the range of products you've got available. But I was completely blown away with it, Peter. Once you've seen animals work with Zoopharmacognosy, it opens up a completely different world of understanding.
Catherine, can you give our community some sort of understanding and idea through examples? And if you have any dog examples, I know that you've been working with large animals, small animals. Our community is predominantly dog-loving community, even though I'm sure that many people have horses and cats. And any examples that you can give me?
Absolutely. There's so many. So some good dog examples. Let me think of a physical one, first of all. So one of the dogs that I was working with, it was a 15-year-old Labrador. It was a very highly bred show Labrador. And its younger brother was about 9 at the time. And for about 3 or 4 years, the elder dog, and to some extent the younger dog, had terrible hair loss. and itching. I mean, really, really bad. And they had been to every specialist in the country. And the old dog was so bad, they were going to have it put down. Anyway, I went along to do a session and I offered all the different herbs, all the different remedies. And this dog selected spirulina as its main remedy. And it ate so much spirulina. And generally the powder, like spirulina or barley grass or wheatgrass, will mix it into a thick paste with a bit of water to make it easier for the dog to ingest. Otherwise it all sticks around its gums. And it took about half a kilo of spirulina in the first session.
Oh my goodness.
And it wasn't sick at all. And then the owner gets left with some products and orders it on. It wasn't just the spirulina it took, but that was the main one. It did take some dandelion root powder and a few oils that I'll come on to for emotional support.
So you let them choose, basically.
You let them choose. You put a whole load of remedies down. You let them choose. There's a bit more skill to it in terms of what you offer first, etc.
Yeah.
But that, in a nutshell, you do. And you let them take as much as they like. Sometimes they'll take things like spirulina to purge from their system, but it didn't purge at all. Anyway, within a month, that dog was virtually completely cured, never came back again, and same with its fungus. And this dog was like probably a week away from being put down because this poor lady had literally tried everything and it was just getting worse and worse. And another example would be I work a lot with traumatized animals. It's something I've really enjoyed doing because helping animals to release trauma. So actually, I use my little Romanian dogs as an example. So when I first got Lola, my mother was talking about it this weekend, actually. When she arrived over from Romania, I have seriously never seen such a traumatized dog. When we got her out of the van, she was solid with like rigor mortis. I mean, just absolutely solid, couldn't move, wouldn't make any eye contact, was absolutely terrified. And when I got her home, I started offering some oils. And when you're offering oils with animals, you basically take the lid off. Imagine this is your bottle of essential oil. Take the lid off. You don't go too close because obviously the dog's sense of taste, and you just let them choose to inhale the oils. Sometimes they will ingest the essential oils, which is why it's really important to make sure you're only working with top quality products. But with her, with my little Lola, I work with violet leaf essential oil in that first night, which is amazing for emotional abuse and fear of pain. And I work with frankincense essential oil, which was amazing for fear. Frankincense is also very good for structural issues, for digestive issues as well, because she did have digestive problems. And the other one that she selected a lot was called neroli. And neroli is orange blossom. And that is really, really good for loss of a loved one. Often animals that have been separated from their mothers too early will select neroli. And this dog, literally in front of my eyes, I wish I'd videoed it because it was quite incredible, although she does appear in quite a few of my courses. She literally went from being a dog that was solid, couldn't look at you, was just hiding in the corner and couldn't look, to yawning and releasing, to starting to do some really big stretches, shook it all off, and then went and lay down with our Labrador. And all of that was in the space of an hour and a half of just letting her choose to inhale these essential oils. She didn't want any applied topically or ingest at that stage. So the results can be absolutely profound. The downside of it is it's not a one-off treatment. You then carry on, and what they change as their body and mind go through the different healing phases will change. And so if an owner's going to work with Zoopharmacognosy, it's really important they're committed to going through the process and to continuing to allow the dog to support. Because if you want a dog to rebalance itself physically or emotionally, you have to allow it access to the substances to do it. So you can't just offer it 1 week and then not offer it again for a couple of weeks if you want to get the results.
You know, I've always been fascinated with nature's way of healing, and you've taken it to the next level. You kind of helped me understand that to a certain degree, I've always known that animals know how to choose certain herbs and so on. But the methods you use and how you approach it, it's just really unique, and I just love it. And I think that people will definitely see their animals in a different way, right? The most common question, for example, is why do dogs eat grass? Is there something wrong with them? Well, can you maybe actually answer that question?
I love it. It's probably one of the ones I get asked the most with regard to dogs, Peter, and I'd love your input on this as well. But from my point of view, there's several reasons why dogs will eat grass. Again, my dogs will choose to eat grass sometimes if they need to purge something from their system. So some dogs will eat grass and also things like cleavers, sticky weed and things. If they've got some parasites that they need to purge out of their system, or some bacteria or some mucus buildup. So number one reason could be purging. You'll know if your dog's doing it for that because they'll eat some grass and they'll bring it up, and normally there will be some mucus or some other bits with it. They could also be eating it for nutritional support. Now, when you watch your dogs eat grass, they're very selective about which grasses they eat and where they get them from. So it's fascinating to watch. Mine do it a lot. I'm very lucky, Peter, because with my Romanians, which were born on the street, and I happen to have a New Forest pony that lived wild for the first 4 years of his life. So these animals that have not been born in captivity have got a different level. They're the best animals to learn from because their innate instincts are so strong. They wouldn't have survived if not. So the grass, it could be to purge something out their system. And it's really, really important because, as we know, dogs will be sick to purge things out of their system. It's quite a natural process for them. Sort of, as humans, we tend to think every time an animal's sick, they must be really ill. But that's not always the case with dogs at all. That could be for nutritional deficiencies. So they'll be very selective and they might be using it for that. And sometimes I have also seen it can be a stress response as well. It's almost, I've seen with some dogs where they're desperately seeking grass. It can be with dogs when they're desperately trying to bring their body back into balance and they're not getting access to that nature enough to do so. But the two main ones from my point of view, nutritional deficiencies and purging.
And also alkalizing and detoxing, right?
Absolutely.
The grass itself has very much an alkalizing property, and I find that dogs that have a tendency to overheat as well are more likely to eat grass because grass is cooling. I'm not going to stay with this topic forever, I promise, but I have one more question. Some of my clients, they ask about their dogs eating bark, or if you're in the forest, and especially in British Columbia and Canada, we have these amazing forests that have these semi-decay cedar trees.
Yeah.
And I see some dogs actually have a tendency to just basically dig a little hole and eat the soil around these trees that are, especially the ancient, the huge trees that are like hundreds and hundreds years old. Do you have any explanation to that?
I do. I mean, normally for me is they're trying to rebalance their microbiome, and soil and the microbiome have got so much in common. And it's so interesting. You picked it out perfectly that they'll be very selective which soil they want to eat. So again, often a detoxing or getting certain minerals in there. So for example, there's a lot of humic substances in the soils, particularly in the forests. And a lot of people have heard of fulvic acid and humic acid, which are fed to basically pull toxins out of the digestive system, out of the body, but also put really important minerals back in a form that the body can really digest it. So you've got soil microbes in there, which are really, really important for rebuilding the microbiome. And there's not probably a single one of us humans or dogs that doesn't need assistance with their microbiome if you're living in any sort of modern living environment. So soil eating, if they're choosing to do it in safe places away from farmland contamination, I would always let my dogs do it. Obviously, because they need it. They need the nutrition that's in there. They need to rebalance the microbes in their gut. They need the nutrients that they're getting from the humic substances. And personally, when people let their dogs choose and sort of do it, I haven't ever seen a problem with that as well. It's very common with horses as well.
Catherine, you've had quite the fascinating journey from corporate world to biology and teaching and holistic health. Was there any moment where you just kind of thought, okay, I'm done and this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life or for the next many years?
There was. I mean, I worked in various different corporate roles, worked in telecoms for quite a long while. And that was really important, actually, because the EMF does affect our dogs a lot, in my experience, which we can come on to. But I was working in a corporate role, and it wasn't that I got to the stage where I really didn't like my job. I mean, I've always been very lucky that I've moved jobs quite a lot. And I've always had the attitude, Peter, that if I don't like it, I'll change it. But I got to the stage, I'd had my children, I was working in the telecoms industry, and I'd been moved to a job because I couldn't run the operations job I was doing anymore because that was over 3 night shifts. They'd moved me into the engineering department. And I just thought, this is not what I'm meant to be doing. Now, if I don't make the change now, I'm never going to. I want to work with animals. I want to show my children that you can do anything, really. So what I did, Peter, is I studied along the side. So I was still working my full-time job, and I started studying all the holistic therapies. Then I started building up my holistic job. So I was sort of doing that by that stage, I was only working 4 days a week. So I would do sort of Fridays and weekends. And then once that got to a stage where I thought, right, I'm just going for it, packed in my main job, and everyone thought I was mad because when they said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be an equine iridologist. And they all just laughed because they said that job does not exist. And I said, well, it does now. And I haven't looked back since. And it was the best thing I did. Obviously, I've gone on to evolve quite a bit from that now, and I don't work that much in person with animals just because I'm so busy doing other things. But it was the best thing I've ever did. So I did get to that stage when my children were really young. I thought I either do it now or I can see myself being stuck here for years to come, and I'm not prepared to do that. So I bit the bullet and went for it. And I think you know, when you've got that conviction and that passion, then the chances are it's going to work out. But it's hard work, isn't it, setting it up and changing careers? You've got to really be driven.
Yeah, I think that, living your truth is the most important part. And people don't realize that when they create a life where there's a lot of stuckness and where they feel stuck at certain job or certain living situation, they don't realize that they're actually making their whole life really stuck, and their progression and sometimes health and everything else, relationships, whatever it is. I love the fact that you, Catherine, march to the beat of your own drum in so many ways. And that's one of the reasons why we've always been finding a lot of topics to talk about. So as a podcaster and YouTuber and healer and influencer, what are the main drivers of your passion for sharing your knowledge and the stories of holistic health and giving people an opportunity to have a deeper insight into their animal health?
I think the main thing for me, Peter, is first and foremost, there's so much misinformation out there, and it's hysterical, really, because the world is inverted, in my opinion. The people that are being told as quacks, not doing traditional medicine, conspiracy theorists, actually often turn out to be right. And I think what I found is the reason why I'm so passionate about talking about it is because so many people are being fed very poor advice. Most people, when they've got a dog in their life, for example, they're desperate to do the best they can for it, but often the advice they're given is the complete opposite. And unfortunately, they don't normally find out until something's gone disastrously wrong. And all I want to do, Peter, is just for people to keep that curiosity, but also realise that we're in a very different world than we were sort of 30, 40, 50 years ago. The stresses on all of us, ourselves and our animals, have changed. I mean, when I first started working in holistic health 20 years ago, I virtually never saw a dog with cancer. I might see one every 6 months. Now I'll probably get 5 calls a week. It's horrendous. Same with horses. So the challenges that we're all facing are very different now. And if people don't know what the challenges are and what they need to avoid, how can they possibly make the best possible choices? I feel it's sort of my duty and other people's duty to sort of share, if I've made plenty of mistakes in my time looking after my animals, but I don't want other people to have to go through that pain and trauma again. So it's not about ever pretending I've got the answers. It's about saying, look, how's this working out for you? It's absolutely terrible that people think a 12-year-old dog is really old for most breeds. The state of most of our animals' health and our own health has never been worse. and people need answers and they need different sources of information. I must say it's very difficult because a lot of the platforms don't like you talking about holistic health. But my real passion comes from giving people a choice and really trying to educate as much as possible and pass on knowledge and ask different questions, because our animals can't advocate for themselves. They're 100% dependent on the humans in their life. Well, my cats aren't, because they go and do what they want when they want and eat what they want when they want. But the rest of the animals in my care, if I make a wrong decision, if I make a bad decision for them, they're the ones that are going to pay the price. And I think there is so much good information out there, but there's also a lot of misinformation. So I just want to try and balance the playing field a bit, give people a different perspective to think of, and then at least they've got access to that information so that they can make a more informed choice. You know, the classic example is the amount of clients that have used, which I know you're very passionate about and have got a brilliant blog up, the spot-on flea and tick treatments and wormers. And the amount of problems I see with that, and people are just still very unaware because they're told to do it every month and they're obedient little citizens and they do it, but the animals pay the price because they're not told there's alternatives. So I'm not going to start, I'm speaking up more and more about it, although I do get into trouble sometimes for doing so, because people have to know there's different information out there. They can make different choices. And our animals need us to know that. You know, we've got to a stage now, I think, where unfortunately a lot of the common sense in terms of how we feed, how we care for our animals, the decisions we make, because we're very much led down one path, and that's not normally in the best interests of the animals, unfortunately.
I can see that you're at the right place at the right time. You just breathe what you do. And I love that. I see the biggest issue in medicine that there's the conflict of the corporate and the business and true health. And just recently, I talked to a PhD biologist who's done research in spaying and neutering, and basically suggesting that the traditional spays and neuters are causing major issues, not only behavioral and emotional issues, but physical issues from cancer and organ disease and premature aging and all that. But nobody really has done this research until her, because she suddenly had access to resources and has been really passionate about this issue. But there are so many issues that have not been researched because the solutions are too cheap. They're not licensable. There's no patents to be gained and so on. And I see that in Canada, for example, that medicine and especially veterinary clinics have become now corporate. They're driven by the profits, by the shareholders and all that. And people need to realize that the time when we could rely on the veterinary profession as the main source of information is over, that it's actually better if we empower ourselves and educate ourselves in many different areas. But it's also confusing, right? Because there are so many sources and people go online and they don't really know what to trust, because you will basically find 360-degree opinion about something. How I approach it, and I wonder how you approach it too, how I approach it is that I choose, like I listen to podcasts, YouTubes, read books, and so on. And then I choose a few trusted sources that are basically my places to go to, whether it's animal medicine or a certain topic or human medicine. But it is confusing. What do you suggest to people when they deal with this dichotomy, the differences in the corporate and the holistic kind of like approach to what really works, or what is the right solution, no matter how cheap or expensive it is? So that's one thing, how to deal with that polarity, but also the overwhelming amount of information that we find.
It's such a good question, Peter. And I mean, everyone's going to have a different take on it. For me, I have a sort of multi-stringed approach. I do listen to a lot of information. And one of the things I've got so much better at over the last few years, it's one of the advantages of getting older, is keeping an open mind on things. So I think it's Wayne Dyer, and, he spent a lot of time in Maui. If you can be open to everything and attached to nothing. And we've all got very strong belief systems, but actually when we allow ourselves to sort of let go of some of those a bit and just sort of keep asking ourselves, how's it working out for you? So the first thing I do is I always sort of have to be really honest, audit with myself. Well, how is it? How are my animals' health? How is my health? Happiness, all aspects of life, because you've got to have a starting point. And then I consume a lot of information, but like you, I've got some real favourites now, which I will go back on. But equally, I do rely on a lot of what I would call intuition and common sense, because you can almost argue anything. I mean, it's like statistics. You can almost make a statistical experiment fit whatever you want with the maths. So for me, I sort of say, well, does this make sense? Does this make sense at an intuitive level and also on an intellectual level? So, for example, and I've just talked about being attached to nothing, but, if you take a bag of kibble, how can you possibly think that feeding the same thing every day, however well supposedly balanced it is going to be healthy for any animal or species? And would you eat that? Would you feed that to your children? Would you eat that and be fooled? Because a lot of people deep down know it doesn't make sense, but they haven't got the confidence to ask the questions. So how I approach it is always keep asking questions. Does this make sense? Is this working out? Are the outcomes good? And then really taking it seriously, because what could be more important use of our time? I mean, I'm a nightmare to live with, Peter, because I'm always working, but it's not work for me. It's passion, because I want to know because I'm like, I can see things are going horribly wrong in various areas of people's lives. And myself, I've spoken to you, my dogs have got a flea allergy. And I know in theory how to sort that out. They're on all the right diet, all the right foods and everything, but it's still not 100% sorted yet. So you've just got to keep curious, keep asking, try and leave your ego at the door is really, really important. No one knows everything. We can all learn more. You and I had a lovely discussion on my podcast about Bobby, the world's eldest dogs, and it made us question a little bit sometimes on the diet side of things. It's like, well, okay, let me reopen my mind to some of these issues again. So for me, keep an open mind, do your research, because at the end of the day, I think one of the biggest problems of modern society is looking to blame other people. If it's important to you, you take the time, you read, you listen, you ask questions. I'm very lucky, Peter, that both my small animal vet and my large animal vets are really good. They're really amazing people. They're really good vets. And I think I scared them a lot in the past because I would ask questions, but asking questions is sort of saying, look, is this the only option? Make their job easy for them. Ask them about options. Show that you've done a bit of research. Show them respect, but also you are your pet's advocate. And if it's not right, unless it's a life or death situation, don't feel you have to make a decision there. Say, well, okay, I'm going to go back. Think about this. Just keep asking questions. Keep looking to good information. The reality of the world we're living in as humans and animals, we've never been sicker. We've never had more mental illness and more depression. Something's wrong. The system that we've been taught to believe is right is basically broken. There's some good bits of it, but there's a lot that's no longer serving us for various reasons. So I think don't be afraid to ask those stupid questions. Don't be afraid to question and be the best advocate you possibly can for any animals in your care.
Yeah, that's a good advice. And there's another issue that I sometimes see, not always, that 99 people may be suggesting certain approach and only one person will be correct. So we need to still actually open our mind to the possibility that whatever is the entrenched status quo may not be actually the solution. I kind of attribute it to the evolutionary path of humans, that we kind of do what other people do and what appear to work. But I think that, when you look at history of humankind, even about Galileo Galilei, let's say, he was the only one who was saying that the earth was a globe and it was spinning, and everyone else was saying that it's not true. Opening our mind to the possibility and looking at medicine and health as the world to explore is actually the best way to go from my perspective, and just approach it with the curiosity of a child. Like, I think that I can see, Catherine, your passion stemming from being eternally curious, being a learner and finding tremendous joy in the learning. And I can see as a person who's also humble and saying, I haven't figured it all, but I have something to share with others. And this is how we have to approach healing. I have a feeling that sometimes in the veterinary profession, especially at school, when we are going through veterinary colleges, it's super hard to go through that. And if we don't know, we fail. So we have this ingrained notion that if we do not know something, we fail. And then many of my colleagues either get very upset and irritated when they're asked questions that they don't know answer to, or they're embarrassed to say, I don't know. But I think that there is one way of finding a good vet. Find a vet who is willing to say, I'm sorry, I don't know. I'll find out. Or what do you think? It's collaboration. It's really about us compiling the knowledge together and using it to the greater good, and not be afraid to learn from others and saying we don't know. So, Catherine, I know that balancing optimism in a world where we face different challenges from obviously socioeconomic and wars and health challenges can be tough. How do you maintain your positive outlook on the world?
It can be really challenging, but I'm very lucky. I have 5 cats. And if you're ever feeling down, watch what your cats do. Cats are absolute experts at being in the present moment and letting it all go. So one thing is, those of us who are watching this are likely to have animals in your lives. Spend as much time with that. But the other thing, the way I stay positive is by having conversations like this, Peter. I must say, I went through a stage probably 2019, 2020, where I had almost lost a lot of hope for humanity. But the last few years of having engaging conversations with people that are open to new ways of doing things, that are not giving up, that are taking responsibility, it's completely reinvigorated me. It's such a cliche, isn't it? You are a product of the 10 people that you spend most time with. Well, I'm very lucky because I spend most time with my cats, my guinea pigs, my horses, my dogs and my rabbits. So that's got to be a good outcome. That's probably how I do. But in all seriousness, is choose wisely the information you use. I'm 100% an optimist, but I'm also quite realistic. So what I've done with my research is sort of saying, look, I can't possibly know what the best choices are if I don't know what the challenges are. So I'm going to look at the challenges and then see that as a really good sort of target for myself to find solutions to them. And the wonderful thing is the body, whether it's a dog or a human or whether it's the soil, is so good at regenerating when we put the right inputs in there. I love the work of Zach Bush, as he quite often says, no one's ever died from a lack of chemotherapy in terms of, you've got to look at the things. When you look at regenerative agriculture, when you look at the bigger picture and just stop looking at humanity and look at the bigger world, and you see that regenerative agriculture, you'd be told on paper a heavily pesticide and herbicide sprayed field will take 20 years to detoxify, and you find it does it in 2. The human body, our animals' bodies are like that. It's like when we stop doing so much harm, it's just amazing, the regenerative power of everything in nature. So I stay optimistic by keep asking questions and keep having conversations like this. And actually, I'm really optimistic, Peter, because I think if one thing the last 3 years have done to me is it's got a lot more people asking questions. And I've seen a huge difference in my clients being far, far more open now to different things that they weren't necessarily a few years ago. Because when you've experienced that being done to yourself, you get it from the animal's perspective a lot more.
I know that everyone faces criticism at their work, especially holistic practitioners. How do you deal with the criticism constructively and handle the feedback sometimes that is not always positive, meaning feedback from others who don't understand what you're doing?
Do you know, it's been a really big challenge for me because I think I should have been Italian. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm very obvious what I'm saying. When I was working in corporate, I'd always get told off because if I thought someone was an idiot, it was written all over my face. I don't hide my emotions very well. But I think the thing is when you know that you're in it for the right reasons, when you know that you're doing this to genuinely help, The biggest ridicule I've had, Peter, has been from my scientific friends and colleagues and the scientific industry, where we've got so into the show me the double-blind placebo study, show me this, show me that. And I think it's an ongoing process, but I think when you sit there, I'm very into gratitude, and, I sit there first thing in the morning and last thing at night, and I think, right, why am I doing this? Because I tell you what, the putting yourself out there on social media is brutal. It's absolutely brutal. You get some good people that generally want to know, and you get some trolls, believe me. But I wouldn't forgive myself if I wasn't sharing things that I'd found out that could save an animal's life, that could save a human's life. I sort of think at the end of my days, what am I going to sit there and look back on? Am I going to be worried about people that have ridiculed me? And there's plenty that do. I mean, I can remember one example when someone Googled me and I came up as an equine iridologist. They took it to the board meeting of the company that I was working with and tried to get them to sack me because they thought I was a witch, literally. I just thought it was hysterical. I think it's quite, I was quite.
It is hysterical.
Really. But it is really hard taking it. But I think when you know that you're in it for the right reasons, I'm a mum. I'm not going to sit there and watch. And I'm a mum to furry beings and two-legged beings. And it's not worth it. What people say, when you know that you're trying to do the best you can and you're trying to help, then you just have to, as I say, pull your big boy pants up and get on with it. But it can be cruel, particularly when it's people close to you. I mean, I work a lot with studying latest technologies, latest supplements, natural remedies like you do. And when someone knows how much research and practical research you've put into it and they still ridicule, it's frustrating. But at the end of the day, I've got a square jar on my desk, and if I can't control it, I'll say a few obscenities and put some money in the square jar and send it off to Romanian Rescue. Yeah.
I find the social media world interesting, but somehow I have this strange personality trait. When there's something that is overwhelming, I just kind of strangely reduce the dosing, like dramatically. So in the last 6 months, for example, I catch myself actually posting and sharing the information, but not really going as much into the replies and the responses and so on, and just kind of like focusing on doing that. And I know that some people, very highly popular people who have millions of followers actually have given me this advice, and it actually works because it's just easier. Like you just kind of keep focused on what you're doing, as you say, and are there for the people who really understand you and who are aligned. And those who don't, like if they, waste their time of sending nasty comments or something, just let them. And that's the other thing. There's this beautiful podcast that I listened to recently on Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a Seal.
I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, because that woman said, just let them.
Mel Robbins.
Yeah, Mel Robbins, let them. It's fantastic. It actually allows me to, when I hear someone to get upset about something else, if it doesn't affect you, just let them. Let them. And it's really freeing, right? So I know that beside teaching courses through Catherine Edwards Academy, you also offer a selection of products. What criteria do you use to select your products, the products that you endorse and that you trust? Because people often ask, how do I choose what is safe, healthy, and not wrong?
I'm so pleased you answered that, because I am so thorough before I start endorsing any product. So what I do first and foremost is I really, really research the product on paper. And what I mean by that is I speak to the people in the company, because I'm a really strong, I've had my own sort of herb shop that I sold in 2020 for natural product shop for animals. And I know how difficult it is, not only to source really good ingredients, but also to control the production process, the packaging, the shipping. It's really, really hard to keep the quality integral through all those stages. So what I really do is I connect in with the company and I do what I call my personal research first. So I'll ask them so many questions, and you can tell a lot by how willing they are and how quickly they come back with the answers. And also, funny enough, a couple of the ones that I'm really big into at the moment, what really appealed to me is the people that I spoke to did come back and say, I don't know, but I'm going to find someone that does and I'll come back to you. Give me a week sort of thing. And I love that. Once I've done that stage, I test the products myself. So I always personally test them first. And then I'll test them on my 2- and 4-legged family and then start rolling them out to my clients. And only after I've done that for a long while will I then put them on my website and start publicly endorsing them, because it's so, so important, because there are some really great products. And obviously there's loads that aren't on my website that are good. So because I work with people all over the world, Peter, like you do, a lot of products are only available in certain countries. So I tend to have the ones on my website will tend to be ones that are available to a large range of the global population. And then, but when I'm working with people, I'm very happy to refer on to other products that I know are really good quality and that you can trust. So with the dog ones, if they're in your area, I always refer on to yours, because your products are absolutely incredible. And I'm not just saying that, but it's something I take really, really seriously on the product side of things, because people have got to be really careful where they spend their money now. You know, inflation has gone up. People are normally very stressed. Often by the time they come to me, there's a lot wrong either with themselves or their animals. So it's a very stressful time. So I really take that responsibility very, very strongly.
That's a good way to put it. We have the responsibility to protect our customers, our patients, whenever we can. So where can people find you?
Well, my main website is catherineedwards.life, Life. And from that, you can access the consults, the courses, the products and things. I'm on YouTube. I've got 2 YouTube channels, because I've got a backup one, because you do have a habit of being taken down on YouTube. So my main channel is Catherine Edwards. And then I've also got the Holistic Biologist. And I'm also quite active on Instagram as well at the moment, which is, I think it's Catherine Edwards Life. Yeah. So please do connect in with me, because I love to hear, you know, I think like you, Peter, I want to be putting my efforts into where people really need the help. And I'm really sort of passionate about that. So please do connect in with me.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. I'm sure that many of our viewers and listeners will find this useful. And finally, Catherine, I would like to know how we envision the future of holistic health and your role in shaping it.
Oh, I'm one of the people, I really don't think much into the future. I tend to be more sort of go with what I'm called to do at the time. But I'm really, really hopeful about holistic health. I think people are really wanting it now. They're wanting a different way. They're really starting to appreciate the healing power of nature. So what I'd really like to see holistic health is back to really be embraced as a very authentic way, a first port of call for everyone to incorporate into their lives for themselves and their animals. So I am not against allopathic medicine at all. You know, my son's broken his arm so many times as a child. I was very grateful for the hospitals, but it's called complementary for a reason. And I think what I'd like to see is people to be far less judgmental, more open-minded, and to incorporate this as a lifestyle change, not as something you just reach for when all else has failed. And my role in it, I love connecting people, Peter. I really love connecting people. I know so many experts all over the world now in so many different areas of holistic health, of all different healing modalities for people and animals. So I'd like to see my role as sort of showcasing what's out there, just how much is out there already for people to access, and helping people get access to these wonderful, wonderful modalities, practitioners, learning, so that they feel really, really confident that they can, one, ask the right questions, and secondly, start really putting it into practice on a daily basis.
I can't even thank you enough, number one, for coming on and talking to me and talking to the whole community. And I hope this is not the last time. I'm very grateful. Is there anything else that you'd like to say at the end?
I'd like to just really thank you, Peter, because I have been following your work for so long. I think your website is the best out there that I've seen. Your blogs, your writing, your willingness to share. And you've been such an inspiration to me. So I would just like to say thank you so much for all you've done for us doggy parents, because you have definitely made the world a better place for every dog out there. You know, I don't know anyone who doesn't come to your website and learn so much and is so grateful for what you share, plus all your supplements. So I really do mean it, Peter. I'm so grateful. It's just been such a pleasure to get to know you. And please keep up the good work, because it's changing so many dogs' lives.
Thank you. I think what you're seeing is your reflection.
Oh, bless.
I'm very grateful for everything that you do, and I look forward to the next conversation. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.